Hello, and thank you for watching this Oceanology International 2012 video. Now, Alan Moore is the Non-Executive Director of Partnerships for Renewables and Ventus VCT and has worked in the UK electricity generation industry for 40 years. He was also Chairman of the Government's Renewables Advisory Board and was responsible for developing and building the UK's first offshore wind farm. So who better than Alan to chair the Marine Renewables session at this year's conference? Alan, very good to see you. Tell us a little bit about some of the topics you hope to be covering.
Yes, the conference stream that I'm chairing relates to renewable energy and renewable energy off the coast of Britain and the rest of the world. That's predominantly wind, wave and tidal flow. Anybody who's been in or on or near the sea knows there's an enormous amount of energy out there. We're looking at a lot of the engineering functions, so the foundation design and the diving and underwater engineering aspects of foundations and how they're installed. We're clearly very interested in the effect we have on the seabed, as will be the consenting authorities. So we have people speaking about ocean fronts. These are areas where sea life is particularly rich, and clearly we want to avoid. Cabling, laying cables. We've got to lay cables out many, many miles to sea. The cables themselves are quite exotic. We have to bury them in the sea. We have to bury them at least a metre deep into the seabed, and that requires underwater vehicles which dig a trench, lay the cables, and then fill them in again. Scouring around the foundational legs. This can undermine the foundations, and the last thing we want, of course, is one of our wind turbines falling into the sea. So we have to understand how a scour works, how we can best avoid it, how we can mitigate against it. These are all topics that we're going to cover in the session.
Yes, you're obviously covering a huge area here. What highlights are there in terms of the topics that we talked about and the speakers?
I'm particularly interested in one of the speakers that we have who's talking about these ocean fronts. I'm a yachtsman, and I've seen these things out at sea. You see basking sharks in their dozens, and they're feeding on the plankton. And these are the places we need to know about. So clearly, we don't want to put a wind turbine in such a place. And I understand we can now think we can do this from satellites. This is fantastic. This is going to save us an enormous amount of money.
So of the three main areas, that wind, wave and tidal, which are you most excited about, if that's not a totally unfair question?
If you'd asked me that question 10 years ago, I'd have said wind power, because I was very much involved with that. Today, I'm not saying that technology is fully proven. Far from it. We have a lot to learn. But there's some very, very exciting things going on with wave and tidal, particularly wave power, where there are at least 100 different designs of machine, all designed to extract energy. And the race is on to find out which is the best one. All sorts of issues arise there, many of them affecting the oceanology. And I'm absolutely fascinated to see who the front runners will be.
What are the main challenges facing the industry, both technological and financial?
Certainly for offshore wind, we've seen the cost increasing recently. Hopefully it's going to come down again. A lot of work's being done right now. We have technology that works. At the moment it's quite expensive, and a lot of work is going into reducing the cost to be competitive with other forms of renewable energy. It's clearly more expensive to build a wind turbine out at sea than it is on land. But there are other factors that mitigate against that. The wind resource out at sea is more than it is on land. The turbines we can put out at sea are much bigger than we can move around on land. And these factors will work against the additional cost of installation and cabling that we inevitably incur in the sea.
We're obviously going through very stringent financial times at the moment. What sort of effect has this had on the sector?
Hopefully, and surprisingly perhaps, very little. Even in the UK, where we clearly are going through a period of financial austerity, the government has seen fit to stick to its remit of being the greenest government ever, and we've seen, whilst we've seen a little bit of pruning of our support and costs, the overall drive towards our legally binding targets of 15% of all our energy from renewables by 2020 have remained in place, and the government recognises that has to happen and put the support systems in place. On the basis of that political support, the industry is continuing to invest, and and the numbers that for the UK alone are of the order of £200 billion of investment between now and 2020. This is huge.
It's a relatively new industry, and I'm just wondering how you recruit new talent into the industry, and if that's something that you'll be dealing with at the conference.
It's an excellent question. Yes, whilst there are engineering skills in the UK in abundance, shipbuilding and the electrical industry, putting the things together is new for us. And I'm pleased to say that in the last couple of years, there have been significant developments in terms of training for offshore renewables. Large training centres have been opened in the last few months with literally hundreds of new apprentices being trained and people being retrained from other closely related industries. And this is one of the things that we'll be covering in the conference. And if you're interested in moving into the area, there will be people there who will be very happy to talk to you about it.
You're obviously covering a huge scope here. Who would you like to see attending these sessions, and why should they attend these sessions?
Well, engineers, clearly offshore engineers, we've got huge challenges in terms of getting costs down for the foundations, for laying cables, for vessels which we use to install the turbines. But also environmentalists and oceanologists. We can't just plonk these things down on the seabed without thinking about our effect on the environment and the ocean in general. So we have to go through very extensive environmental impact assessments and the like, strategic environmental assessments, before we're allowed to put these things into the sea. That normally involves 2 or 3 years of work with specialist marine environmentalists, marine mammal specialists, fisheries experts. These are all entirely relevant to our consent that we have to receive before we can put these things in the sea.